Why does she think it is that all three female prime ministers have been Conservative?
Hello my guys, gals and non-binary pals, and welcome to a new video by Dan Fatales. My name is Alicia, my pronouns are she, they, and today we're going to talk about Liz Truss becoming the third female Prime Minister of the UK, after two other Conservative women. And let's look at why women in politics tend to rise amongst the right, which is supposedly the side of politics more misogynistic and the least interested in feminism. But before we get started, let me thank our Patreons that make it possible for us to dedicate time to research and to make these videos, and to ask those of you who can afford it to consider joining in, as many of the topics we discuss are not exactly YouTube algorithm friendly, and for the moment our channel is not even monetized, so Patreon and coffee donations are all we can count on to continue and produce content here. If you can support our work, head on to Patreon and join the revolution! Liz Truss is the new leader of the Conservative Party, the new British Prime Minister. Out of 11 options, she won against her final contender, Rishi Sunak, because, let's admit it, out of a choice between a very rich, brown-skinned man with experience in financial markets and hedge funds, and a white woman who couldn't negotiate her way out of a wet paper trade deal,
in December, I'll be in Beijing, opening up new pork markets.
the choice is obvious. Which kinda explains why I am always naively surprised by any minority or marginalized community supporting the Tories, when they exist to service the interest of the cis-het, white, old, rich, able man. But without wanting to sound loaded from the start. Remember how Tories and Tory Brexiteers were all my democracy to uphold the referendum result where 17 million people decided to leave the EU, carrying with them 48 million other people? The concept of the majority? Well, 81,000 Tory members voted for Liz Truss to be the Prime Minister. Not the MPs that the public voted in, not the 67 million people living in the UK, not even the 48 million registered to vote. The 0.01% of the UK population just voted on the Prime Minister, which, if not enforced as an election, is going to run the country for 2 years still. Earlier in the PM race, even old-school Tories claiming centrist positions, like Baroness Barcy,
Penny Mordaunt, which I think would have been a return to the sane middle ground,
said they were hoping for another woman, Penny Mordaunt, to win the race. Not because she was decidedly less outlandish with her statements, but likely because unless you're an angry, red-faced old man, those Tories playing the long game realize that to stand a chance against Labour in the next election, they need something more competitive than the plain anger and antagonism Boris Johnson won the last election with. Because if in 2019, after 3.5 years of Brexit anticipation hell, he could rail up and promise nothing practical but get Brexit done, that ship has now sailed. That supposedly gave the Tories what they wanted. Sovereignty from Brussels? Come on. We all know they couldn't name one thing Brussels actually forbade them to do. But we all know the unofficial real reason for the Brexit vote. Immigration. And the somewhat misplaced idea that non-white people immigration had anything to do with Europe. Seriously. Do you remember the wife swap Brexit edition with the sad white man walking in a market and upset at Europe by the amount of brown faces present? By the way, are English people not taught about the history of the empire they are so proud of? Because that is what is behind all the immigration they resent. Countries conquered by the empire that believed the UK was their motherland, and so they came over to the motherland. History not a popular subject here. Seems weird given the supposed pride they had in slave trader statues being left around for historical purposes. Looking at you, Colston supporters. But back to Penny Mordaunt. Whether she actually would have brought the Tories back from far right to centre right or not does not matter, because she got out of the race pretty soon, and we were left with Rishi and Liz, both part of the Boris cabinet. Ironically, since the beginning, any poll told the Tories that Rishi would have given them the better chance against Labour. The decision between Truss and Sunak was voted by the members of the Conservative Party, not the MPs, those 81,000 people, the 0.01% of the British population. And turns out the actual Tory members cannot get over their racism, even if it means a better chance of standing up to Labour. Nope. Officially, most Twitter rants by Tory members' voters mention Sunak being a snake ousting Boris, and therefore Truss supporting the white supremacist Johnson blindly becomes their choice. A more limited number claims the tax cut promises from Truss are more in line with their wants than the more realistic, we have debts to pay, I cannot cut taxes from Sunak. But again, look closer and a very peculiar image starts being painted. On Twitter, which is the main social media battleground where different bubbles clash, Liz Truss tweets are either in support or against. But Rishi Sunak's feature a disproportionate amount of ad hoc made memes, shared, retweeted memes to deride and take credibility away from him. Not that he deserves any credibility, like any Tory if you ask me, but I find it interesting because this was the case just for him. Average Tory member is of a certain age. They might love to share and retweet an insulting meme about anyone, but they are not part of the generation that makes them, that cares or thinks about making them. Turns out a lot of these memes were actually made not necessarily by Tory members at all, and the only reason I can imagine is, whereas the Tories want to wait on Rishi, whether because he's not white or whether because he betrayed Boris, ignoring the polls that give him a better chance to fight Labour, the left has kept well in their mind that Liz Truss's PM gives Labour a 17-point lead. That means that if we were to vote today in an election, Labour would win with a landslide, without having to do anything but not being the Tories led by Liz Truss. So what is it about Liz Truss that finally brings down the Tories enough for a majority to see? It wasn't the party scandals, the lies to the Queen, to the people, the let the bodies pile up, the defense of a rule for us and another for them, the touristic travels of Dominic Cummings, the lack of any kind of actual answer Boris Johnson ever not gave during Prime Minister question time. None of that brought down the Tories in the poll like Liz Truss. Damn, girl, what's about you? Better said, what is it about right-wing women?
And of course, we couldn't have a discussion on this channel about British politics without a message from me, the transgender princess of Wales. Because what can't be ignored in this leadership debate is the particularly cruel brand of transphobia that has been used by hopeful prime ministers as a political weapon to show who's the biggest piece of shit. It's actually a very interesting point that Theresa May, the woman who, as Home Secretary, instituted the hostile environment for migrants and led to the Windrush scandal, was actually the one to introduce the consultation on the Gender Recognition Act reform seeking to move forward transgender rights in the UK, even made it a part of her first speech as Prime Minister. This consultation can actually be seen as the catalyst for the vast majority of transphobic discourse online. The increase in negative articles was very clearly measured, and an attack on several fronts was orchestrated, focusing on single-sex spaces, prisons, and healthcare for transgender youth. Ironically, this increase in discourse may also have had the side effect of making many more closeted trans people become aware of transgender experiences and start to recognize the same in themselves. Alas, despite overwhelming support from the public for self-ID to be implemented, by the time the results were published and the decision was to be made, Boris was Prime Minister and Liz Truss was now the Minister for Women and Equalities. She decided that despite public support, the Gender Recognition Act as it currently stands was a fair and measured approach and affirmed the need for medical gatekeeping to protect the sanctity of the woman's bathroom, despite the Equalities Act already saying that anyone can basically use anywhere they wanted based on what's most comfortable for them. For the most part though, the discourse on trans rights remained online. Despite several debates and select committee reviews in Parliament, Liz Truss essentially refused to participate, called the matter closed. However, this year, things have started to change. As the excuse of the pandemic started to lift, a trap of the Tories' own making by declaring the pandemic over, the royal fuck-up of Brexit started to be realised. Partygate, the cost of living crisis all got into full swing. Boris panicked and started to throw spaghetti at the wall to see which dead cat would stick, and landed on transphobia. In a surprise move, it was announced last minute in March that the ban on conversion therapy, a manifesto promise, would not actually go ahead after all, due to concerns over how mental health professionals would have difficulty navigating the law when helping young people questioning their gender. In yet another surprise move, this was U-turned again into there will be a ban on conversion therapy, but trans people will be exempt. When questioned on this in an interview, Boris basically doubled down on his views by saying that trans youth cannot consent to treatment and trans women should not be competing in sports. This led to a flurry of horrendous moments for trans people across the country as journalists started asking everyone without any cause or reason, what is a woman? Phrases like, at least I know what a woman is, were thrown at the opposition during Prime Minister's questions, and after the ban on trans sports, Boris decided to double down even more and declared that a woman cannot be born with a penis. Well, I'm sure he's looked up the skirts of enough women to be sure. It all kind of worked though. The discussion was taken off of what a colossal fuck up they all were, just long enough to keep Boris limping along until finally he gave in and resigned. As candidates were announced, the hopeful for transes all over the country was Penny Mordaunt. Why? Because she had once said that yes, trans women are women.
Trans men are men, trans women are women.
That's it. That's the tweet. All we really want at this point is to be left alone. We don't have any hope that things will get better for us. Not under the Tories anyway. But with Mordaunt, there was the hope that maybe she wouldn't make things worse. Alas, this was immediately used against her and she had to U-turn on her niceness with a tirade of tweets denouncing her previous position to show that yes, she is just as much of a monster as the rest of them. Kemi Badenoch had promised to reintroduce Section 28 in schools, Truss would do what she's always done, and Rishi was just credible enough to competently harm the country of which we were in. As the others were eliminated and we were left with only two, Rishi realised, despite winning the MP's votes, that his popularity amongst members was not the same. I wonder why. He decided to ramp up the transphobia dial to distract from his economic policy and vowed to change the Equalities Act to remove the exemptions for gender identity from single-sex spaces. Literally, it's the best piece of legislation that we have to protect our way of life. This would be an act of cultural genocide, as any visibly trans person would struggle to function in public spaces, forced to either use the wrong bathroom and risk assault, or use the right bathroom and risk legal repercussions. So we were left with two absolutely horrific outcomes. Someone who would be more of a colossal fuck-up than Boris and use transphobia to mask her failures, or someone who might just be competent enough to impose active harm on the transgender community. Either candidate becoming PM is a devastating blow. I've seen friends get completely swept up in the fear, unable to go outside as they worry that some angry prick on the street might just decide today's the day. Some have considered leaving the country, others detransitioning, others much worse. It hurts. It sucks to be under this constant barrage every single day. To not know what the person sat next to you on the bus thinks about you, that maybe they believe trans people are groomers and are just looking for an excuse. Thankfully, the British public in large don't seem to buy into this narrative, just people on Twitter. But like COVID, if you encounter 100 people throughout the day, you can't know which one of them is infected by the transphobic virus, just waiting for an opportunity to exact their twisted version of justice. And so you start treating everyone as though they could. Wearing a mask to hide who you are. Keeping your distance. Avoiding closed spaces. Or worse, self-isolating.
I read Right-Wing Women by Andrea Dworkin a few months ago. By the way, disclaimer, my knowledge of Andrea Dworkin's work is limited to this book. I know she's a radical feminist and as such, loved by TERFs. But if they actually read, which no surprise they don't, they'd know that she was actually a trans ally, die mad. For the swerve issues I hear about the rest of her work, I have been a sex worker myself, and I will forever stand with decriminalization and the right of women to decide for themselves. Anything that demands abolition without first a reset of the capitalist system just hurts women, including sex workers. With that out of the way, I read Right-Wing Women as I was researching for the infamous and now over-researched video on internalized misogyny. Because that's the core of being a woman and supporting right-wing politics, which seem to be oppressive and limiting to women. And yet, we have some of the worst, harshest, least feminist and unsympathetic right-wing leaders being women. Margaret Thatcher is universally recognized as a monster in the UK. Her lack of empathy and active cruelty is second to none. She infamously claimed it was poor people's own fault for their condition, because there is no such thing as society, promoting the neoliberal capitalistic ideal of pure individualism and conveniently forgetting the shoulders of giants most well-off people stand on. So, why would women go against their own interest towards equality and liberation from the patriarchy to actually support the white, cis-het, able, rich men ideals of right-wing politics? Andrea thinks it's because they are less idealistic and more pragmatic than their left-wing counterparts. Left-wing people hope to change the world, and most of the time they know they won't see the change happening in their lifetime. Right-wing women are more practical and to the point. They need to live as well as they can now, while they are alive. And honestly, this take sort of gave me some empathy, at least to understand their motives, which are not simply randomly cruel to anyone who's under them in the marginalization ladder, but more focused on how to acquire privilege, and privilege exists in opposition to those who don't have it. Right-wing women know that men are trash. They are violent, they are rapists, and they have all the power in society. Yet, whereas left-wing women would think about dismantling the patriarchy, they have gone more like, okay, what are the principles that these men claim to be following, and how do we turn them to our advantage? Patriarchal bargain. A man who claims right-wing principles will usually be somewhat religious, at least for show, because most organized religions are patriarchal, so it does help the job for them upholding their superiority in society anyway. Being religious means that he will marry. He will choose a woman and have a family with her. Will support her economically, she will have his children, and all of these must bring right-wing women some sort of safety from other men. Sure, maybe her husband is violent, maybe he's unpleasant, but he is just one. And his resources and the fact that she belongs to him make her safe, and she thinks somewhat untouchable to other men. No, not because they respect her, but because they might respect the man, and she's his property. When you look at things this way, all of a sudden, every fight we consider for a civil or human right becomes something that attacks this view. If the women have the right to vote, to work, then it means the husband might demand they work instead of just being the queen of the house. And they won't be able to count on that support, economical support, just from him. Isn't having children and taking care of them work enough for her? Wasn't that the deal? If abortion is allowed, then a man who sleeps around can demand a woman has one. Instead, a right-wing woman sees getting pregnant as a guarantee that would force him to marry her and therefore bring the family, respectability, safety that being part of his family would bring. If the gays, the transes, and all these people who do not respect the gender binary are allowed to test things, the nuclear family might implode. And the nuclear family is the only thing right-wing women consider something they can have power over, as wives, as mothers. Those are the reasons a woman is supposedly respected in right-wing circles. If your wifedom and motherhood are not guaranteed to bring a family, safety and respectability, then they are all random preys of violent men who could and would overpower them. They know that. They just take the easier, more direct option. I might not have equality tomorrow or even in my lifetime, but I can get a husband that has to provide for me and my children tomorrow. If you think about it, it's very cold but very practical. Very soul-consuming, I imagine. So the way we started to give Valium to depressed housewives in the 50s starts to make more sense. But then again, this kind of makes sense for the standard housewife, dependent woman. But then, how are they even allowed in politics, in any role of power beyond their realm? The family house. It's funny how conservative women are so against gender identities being unrelated to anatomy, because they are some of the biggest fans of toxic masculinity and will do their best to embody it. Admittedly, if right-wing values keep at best a woman as queen of the kitchen, how do right-wing women even make it to the politics?
Can I ask my right honourable friend, why does she think it is that all three female prime ministers have been conservative?
Thank you for the question, Teresa. Two reasons. One is their thinking, genuinely believing that if they behave ruthlessly, violently, cruelly, like they know men are, then somehow they'll be admitted to the men's club as well. I know, for someone who realized that men are crap, this world is crap, but the only power I can have is in the kitchen and that will protect me from other men, it is a bit of a naive belief. But I guess whereas they might fail to see the power in a movement that wants to dismantle patriarchy, we haven't considered the delusion of grandeur that allows them to believe that they will be the one woman, special enough to be considered a man by other men. And that's how we got Margaret Thatcher and her iron fist. This is what Theresa May, by the way, was trying to do, sounding harsh and repetitive with Brexit means Brexit. Not because she didn't know that it meant nothing, but exactly because she has seen decades of men in her party blabbering without having to follow through. How common is to hear men say, "Because I say so." The second reason, really, is the reminder that men are crap, and right-wing men are the scum on top of the crap. Why do these men, who hold all the power in a patriarchal system amongst people who want to uphold it, allow women in? Because they need someone to blame.
The glass cliff is the phenomenon of women in leadership roles, such as executives in the corporate world and female political election candidates, being likelier than men to achieve leadership roles during periods of crisis or downturn, when the risk of failure is highest.
Which literally explains why Theresa May ran practically unopposed to Conservative leader and Prime Minister in 2016. Because Brexit had to happen. Everyone knew that no one had any idea on how to make it work, so let a woman take the blame for the failure. By the way, this is an example that actually is on the Wikipedia description of the glass cliff. And which also explains why now Liz Truss was elected. Make no mistake, the process to skim down on candidates for party leadership is meant to allow the Tory MPs to basically choose 2 candidates to get to the final vote round to the Tory party members, knowing already what the overall feeling about the candidates are. In 2019, Boris Johnson was put against Jeremy Hunt. Hunt with a H, notoriously hated by everyone. With MPs voting for Hunt over all the other candidates because they knew that he had no chance of winning when put to the party members. Had it been Boris versus Michael Gove, the preference might have gone either way. They couldn't allow that. In a dire situation like the UK is in right now, scandals and trust lost on the government was partying in Downing Street and laughing about it while the corpses were piling up high. A cost of living crisis who won't allow millions of people to pay their bills this winter and no help, support or consideration to help those who will be hit the hardest, there's a good chance that the Tories know that after 12 years of rule that has put this country in a worse off situation on every level except for millionaires, they know that they have made a mess. And they might want to lose the next election so that Labour will be left cleaning their mess, likely failing and being very criticisable at that, and therefore probably guaranteed another 10 or 15 years of Tory ruling after failing to undo all the damage the Tories have done, and therefore taking the blame for it. Labour, that is. And so, who do we put in charge of the sinking ship? Some power-hungry woman who's adopted the iron fist idea that being cruel, she is manly enough to be accepted by men as their leader. Seriously, girl, that deluded? You were that deluded? And whose delusion of grandeur makes her blind to the whole situation as long as she can go down in history as one of the prime ministers of Great Britain. Doesn't matter the legacy. I mean, didn't matter for Johnson either, just that the name is there unforgotten. Oh, trust me, Liz, we won't forget. And that's how you set up a glass cliff. The situation is critical. Give the impossible government responsibility to sort things out to a woman. If she succeeds, hey, yay, see how progressive we are with a woman in charge? All those baddies on the left are lying about us. We are the progressives. When she fails, well, what did you expect from an incompetent woman? That's why we uphold the patriarchy, and you should too. A woman who decided to be part of the right-wing political spectrum molds herself after the only model of success she has been shown. A man's. So they try to embody their ruthlessness, follow their ideas and principles, at times even in a stronger way than men do, which is why they are never and never want to be called feminists, because they try their best to make you forget they are women at all. Of course, there's irony when they start to go against equality and feminist issues, which are the reasons doors were open for them to get in that position in the first place. But as we have seen with people like, I don't know, Priti Patel, their point is exactly to go through those doors, establish themselves, and make sure no other woman comes. Because then they would be subject to comparison, scrutiny on the basis of their gender. And for someone who's fighting so hard to pass for a man, that's unacceptable. Right-wing women getting into power is never a win for equality, for feminism, because to get into power, They have to make their internalized misogyny a crucial part of their identity. So there is no chance they will ever dismantle it. They are
Trojan horses used by right-wing male politicians to further their own battles. A woman candidate, especially when the left lacks a woman rival to oppose her, makes the conservative ideology less unpopular. And that's how right-wing politics manages to spread their values through the instrumental use of women as perfect wives and mothers.
Because remember, Liz, a wife and a mother, at times a sub, is all the conservatives really accept you can be. There is no hard line enough you can push. And if you are in doubt, check in with the memory society as of Margaret and Teresa. But you, oh you are the special one. That's the problem. You all think you're the special one. You're not like the other girls. And that's how those men who voted you in set you up for failure. Making you feel special is how they divide and conquer, because they know. They know a single power-hungry woman can't change a thing. They'll put you in your place whenever they feel like it. But had you supported other women? Had there been a group of women in solidarity, working together for women as a whole, not as special pretty little princesses, well, those old conservative men could be in trouble then. But you're not ready to have this conversation yet. I guess that's why you love to gatekeep even the word woman. You're making us all worse off today, but good luck, Liz, warts and all.
The ludicrous debates about languages, statues and pronouns. Our history, warts and all, is what makes us what we are today.